Before I walk through all of the components of the RTI framework developed for this project, I want to take a moment to emphasize the large mindset shift my department embraced during its development. The teach, test, teach data-driven model of instruction that's necessary for effective response to intervention required major changes in the way we planned our lessons and assessed our students. So I'm grateful for adventurous colleagues who are willing to move out of their comfort zones for the sake of their students' learning. When I flipped my classroom 3 years ago, it forced me to deconstruct the 8th grade science standards into discrete pieces of knowledge and very specific skills that my students needed. This was a new process for some teachers in my department. Relying on short 5-question assessments is a major change for all of us, and to varying degrees, so is the level of differentiation that's required in lessons to make interventions in the classroom possible. Really, what we discovered together is that the starting point for successful intensive intervention is very intentional and strong base classroom instruction, or Tier 1 instruction if you want to use the RTI terms. With that being said, let's take a look at the RTI framework that was developed during this project. Everything except the assessment banks in this system is created with Google's suite of applications, and it's all housed in Google Drive. A departmental or campus RTI coordinator would be responsible for creating a folder for a campus or department, such as this sample science department folder. Housed in the folder, you have all of the template documents used in the framework. An RTI flowchart so everyone is on the same page about when to move students from one tier to another, as well as what interventions at each tier look like. Parent letters in English and Spanish, these are the sample letters generated by TEA and contain all the necessary components laid out for parent communication by the state. It has a sample progress monitoring form that teachers can customize as they develop plans for students in Tier 2, and a progress monitoring sheet that teachers can import data into directly. It's important to note that only the RTI coordinator has access to these original templates. So if a teacher is new to Google Apps, they don't have access and can't delete or alter the templates. Individual teachers have a copy of each of these templates in a folder that's shared with the RTI coordinator. So if something goes amiss, they can be copied and shared again without affecting everyone else. So let's take a closer look at each of these documents and a couple of examples of what they might look like in actual practice. First, let's look at the progress monitoring sheet that can be used to document student progress both in Tier 1 and 2. Just a note, I'm sure that there are those who would disagree with me, but small group teacher-led instruction in this framework is considered a Tier 1 intervention, unless the small group instruction is made on a scheduled and sustained basis, which is Tier 2. Often, struggling students only need a little intervention and a second chance to try a skill in order to eliminate misconceptions or correct steps in a process. Every student should have access to small group instruction based on their needs, hence the classification of this intervention as Tier 1. Back to the Google Sheet. After a formative assessment, teachers can sort data automatically in Eduphoria, a program where our assessments and assessment results are stored. After it's sorted and downloaded as an Excel file, teachers can group students flexibly into categories, including a category for students who didn't master the content or skills according to some predetermined cut score. Student data in this category can simply be copied and pasted from the downloaded Excel sheet into this Google form. These are learners who are determined to keep an eye on. So the sheet is color-coded, and to the right there's a column that shows a snapshot of progress to make things intuitive to track with just a glance. So say little Johnny here doesn't do so well on the first formative assessment, and that he's participated in 2 small group sessions, one with the teacher and the other peer-led, that address the standards he's struggling with. In this case, it's 8.5a. Since his progress is nominal, this might warrant more intensive intervention for LJ. In Tier 2, this sheet can serve as part of the documentation process for those interventions as well, providing a complete picture of his progress. Additionally, students may be added to the sheet if they struggle with the standard later on or simply forget material later in the year because they crammed for the assessment. So using this sheet presupposes that assessment is continuous rather than just at the end of a week or a unit. You'll also note that there are separate tabs for each standard at the bottom of the sheet, so it will be updated throughout the course of the year as well as serve as a record of how students who initially struggled have progressed standard by standard. Okay, so the rest of the templates deal with Tier 2 interventions, so let's look at the example folder for little Johnny. When moving a student to Tier 2, the first thing a teacher will have to do is develop an intervention plan using the Tier 2 RTI form here. This form includes observed behaviors, these could be social or academic, that warrant more intensive intervention. Goals for the student interventions to be used, a time frame, how progress will be monitored, and the results of the intervention. So in this case, little Johnny is struggling to pass assessments, he loses his papers, and he's unaware of due dates. We developed some measurable goals and articulated appropriate interventions that will be used. In this case, some extra time with the content, different modes of instruction, and some help with organizational skills, some classic middle school stuff. So little Johnny will receive the interventions for 6 weeks, and progress will be evaluated after 3 weeks. All goals in this case will be monitored through a teacher-generated Google form. So let's take a look at what that involves. Creating a form that generates data in a usable way may be the hardest part of this process for teachers, but it's really pretty easy overall. This example form for LJ has 6 questions for the teacher to complete. You can see in this example that the teacher can track data from progress monitoring assessments directly in the form without the need to run a Scantron or use Excel or Eduphoria. In practice, these assessments would be given in a small group, and if I were teaching, I would actually score the assessment with little Johnny immediately and record the results in this form with the click of a button. What's nice about using Google Suite and all of its applications is that this whole process can be coordinated through Google Calendar. As you can see, I've created a reoccurring event for little Johnny that corresponds to his plan, the time frame, and it's super easy to attach both his plan and a link to his progress monitoring form within this event. In this way, when I get a notification for little Johnny's intervention, everything I need to document his progress is easily accessible, and I can fill it out on a phone or an iPad in real time. Creating the Tier 2 plans, creating the forms and calendar events takes some time up front. But I think it reduces the amount of time teachers spend documenting interventions. You get that time back. It also increases the likelihood that the intervention plan will be followed with fidelity. You can include guests for these events. There are some useful applications here. Our students use Gmail, and I include them as guests and have them set up notifications as well. But if you do this, you have to be careful to ensure they don't have any editing rights to the plan or to the progress monitoring form that is attached to the calendar event. So this works well for disorganized or forgetful students who are supposed to attend tutoring. Parents could be included on this. In this case, I invited an interventionist who may be working with little Johnny as well. So let's go back to the progress monitoring form for a moment. In most cases, the form itself will generate a usable report of student progress. But Google Forms does not automatically generate line graphs in its reports. Instead, for student progress on assessments, you get these bar graphs, which really bothers the science instructor in me. I don't like this representation of little Johnny's progress on standards or grades. So the solution's simple. You can just automatically generate a sheet of the data collected by the form and use the raw data to make a graph. Once you learn how, it takes only a minute or two. I would use graphs like these example graphs in a parent meeting, but the data from the form itself, the auto-generated representations, could be used as well. So the last step in Tier 2, or the whole process, is to notify parents. This is easily done by completing the form letter provided by TEA. Teachers have a copy in their folders. In fact, as teachers create a folder for each Tier 2 student, the process becomes easier and easier, especially if they're using the same interventions for more than one student, because the documents and forms can be copied immediately in Google Drive. The parent letters are concise and very easy to write. If a student progresses beyond Tier 2 and is moved into Tier 3, this process is essentially the same, except it becomes more collaborative. So campus interventionists and administration get involved at this point. And really, using Google shines here as well, because creating the forms and plans collaboratively is facilitated by sharing them with colleagues directly through Drive. it makes the entire process fairly seamless and easy. So that concludes the tour of this RTI system. I look forward to testing its efficacy in the upcoming year and hope that it boosts academic outcomes and serves the needs of our students. Thanks for your interest and for taking the time to read my report and watch this tour.